Welcome to the Frog Factor podcast. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. It's Wednesday, September 3rd, and we're talking TCU athletics, specifically TCU football. On today's show, I want to get into how much I just don't really like this schedule. I hate that there's a bye week this week. I understand it, short week, you're traveling, but I would really like to play Abilene Christian on Saturday and then have a bye week between the SMU game, but I'll get more into that later on in the program. Jerry Meyer, 2027 quarterback. That's right. He's a junior right now at Waxahachie. He committed to TCU over the weekend. That was a big pickup. Their first 2027 recruit. He's a highly rated guy. Well, not rated yet, but had a lot of offers. Over 20 offers. Picked TCU over Nebraska, Baylor, Houston, and others. And of course, a lot about the North Carolina game and the season opening win for TCU. But I'll start with a quick update. If you don't want to hear about this part of it, then just skip to like the 3-minute mark of this video and we'll jump right into the game and everything surrounding TCU football right now. But a number of you have asked me, like, what happened to Locked On Horned Frogs? What's the deal? I got let go. I got a phone call. I was pulling into the school line to pick up my kids on Friday. I don't remember when that was. I guess it was a week and a half ago. And it was a short conversation, as those typically are. They said they were going a different direction. I don't know what the future of that show is. I'm not sure if they'll have another host, but it's not going to be me. They decided to move on. I was obviously really disappointed. I was surprised. There was no indication on my end that anything was going to change or need to change. It was right before the season started, which was super confusing to me. But yeah, I'm no longer with the Locked On Network. First time I've ever been fired in my life. So new milestone for myself, right? What I'm doing right now is I'm honestly still trying to figure out what the future holds as far as covering TCU athletics. I've been in conversation with a few different companies about covering the team in some form or fashion. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like. So for now, I just started this YouTube channel, the Frog Factor Podcast, and I'm going to post podcasts 3 days a week. Somebody asked me if it's going to be on Spotify. I don't know yet. Eventually, yes, I think it will be, but I'm waiting to figure out if I end up going with like a company and merging with them, then they'll have expectations and things they want me to do, and I'll sort of fall in line with that, and that'll determine what I do moving forward. If I end up just doing the solo, then yes, eventually I'll put the episodes up everywhere podcasts are. But for right now, the best thing to do is to subscribe to the Frog Factor Podcast YouTube channel or follow me on Twitter at SimcoxSteven, because when I make a decision about whatever I'm going to do, I will update you on in both those places. And all you need to know right now is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll have episodes up here on YouTube, and I hope to have a decision about like what the future looks like before the ACU game. So coming up pretty quickly. Back to TCU, they're 1-0. They take down Bill Belichick. Did you know he's coaching the North Carolina Tar Heels and the North Carolina Tar Heels in the season opener? It was a complete butt whooping. I mean, this was not a highly contested, close ball game. The only time I ever really got nervous outside the first drive, and I wouldn't even say it nervous as far as like, I never thought TCU was going to lose after they took the lead, but Max Johnson came in and led a touchdown drive, and then TCU had a bad drive, and Max was moving them down again. And I thought, man, I really hope this doesn't turn into like a 41-28 type of game that looks a lot closer than it is, and you're kind of nervous, and maybe your offense has to get a couple first downs to really salt the game away. But North Carolina fumbled. Josh Weaver went down and took the Frogs on one more touchdown drive, and that was really it. And Sonny Dykes said after the game, he was like, look, we felt disrespected. We felt like there was so much talk about this football game, about this season opener, and none of it was about us. And he was right. If you watch that pregame show, it was the Bill Belichick Power Hour. There was one or two segments about TCU, but everything else was about Bill. 3 of the 4 panelists on the College Game Day-esque set there, Pat McAfee, Nick Saban, Teddy Bruschi, they picked North Carolina to win the ball game. It was all about Bill and his debut. And I understand he's one of the most famous and best coaches in the history of the sport. But TCU is a good team. And the thing that impressed me last night was they went out there 2 nights ago, because you're listening to this on Wednesday. They went out there, they handled their business, and from start to finish, they were the better team. If you look back to last year, they had similar performances against Arizona and Oklahoma State. Cincinnati, not so much, but I think, not to make an excuse for them, I do feel like the weather was a factor in the Cincinnati game. The cold, the snow made that a little more difficult. However, over the last, 3 or 4 times they've played opponents who have less talent than them. They haven't played with their food. It hasn't been in doubt. They've gone out there, they've won convincingly, and they've handled their business, which is really good to see. Also, my friend JD Sailors, who is part of the Lupton Drinking Club, and I think he's also part of the Uninformed Frog podcast group as well. He put this tweet up on Tuesday morning after the win on Monday night, and it was good perspective. He says last year against Stanford, reasonable. He says is a reasonable comp to North Carolina. Those two teams. TCU rushed for 3.1 yards per carry. They lost the turnover battle. They gave up 286 yards of total offense. They allowed a 100-yard receiver. They committed 7 penalties for 100 yards. And he capped that off by saying, yeah, I'm not buying that last night was just as simple as having a bad team as an opponent. And I would agree with that. Like, North Carolina is not good, okay? They're not a good football team. They might not even win 4 games this year. That was a rough scene for Bill Belichick's team. But this was a completely dominating victory. As he said, last year they rushed for 3 yards a carry against Stanford. Last night, the team rushed for 7.5 yards per carry. Kavorian Barnes led the way with 113 yards on 10 yards per carry. They gave up 283 yards or 286 yards of offense last year. Last night, 172 yards through the air, 50 yards on the ground. North Carolina rushed for 1.8 yards per carry. TCU didn't have a lot of penalties. The secondary held up really well. I felt like Vernon Glover, Channing Canada, Avery Helm, when he got reps there, they all did a good job. Outside of that first drive, the defense was flying around. They were making plays. They were dominant. Again, this was like that Stanford game last year. Jack Besh, Josh Hoover heroics in the fourth quarter to win the game. The offense looked out of sorts pretty much all game long. They did have a turnover last night or on Monday night. And I didn't love that screen pass call. I'll get to that later on in the show too. That was an ill-advised throw by Josh, but that was really his only bad decision all night long. Besides that, he looked like he was in complete control. TCU had 2 defensive touchdowns. Scoop and score by Devin Deal, pick 6 by Bud Clark. Kavorian Barnes brought an entirely new energy to the running game, had that 75-yard touchdown run. And, the thing that stood out to me about Kavorian was his physicality, his ability to just stick his face mask in somebody's chest and run him over. But he also showed some great speed. On that 75-yard touchdown run, I saw that he clocked at 20 miles per hour, almost 21 miles per hour, and he ran away from that defense. That was good to see because I didn't know if he had that skill set, but he ran away from the UNC defense. Cade Bennett had a great block, pulling around at the guard position and kicking out at the second level. Eric McAllister was sprinting down the field. Eric McAllister, who had a frustrating night. They were double teaming him. They were shading a safety over. They made it very clear from the start of that ball game, we don't want this guy to be the dude that beats us. He didn't hang his head. He said, okay, I'll contribute in other ways. My running back gets an opening on a counter play. I'm going to sprint down the sidelines and block 2 people and make sure that he has a clear path to the end zone and gets there untouched. That's winning football. Nate Palmer, when the second team offense is in there, putting his head down on 4th and 4 and driving his feet and getting a first down, that's winning football, right? The defense flying around and making plays and causing turnovers late into that ball game when the result wasn't really in doubt anymore. That's winning football by TCU. And that's what you wanted to see. It was also the first time in the Sonny Dykes era, that first drive notwithstanding, that the team got off to a good start. They had the lead at halftime. They were up 20-7. They left some points on the board, but they had a really good drive at the end of the half. Situational football, they excelled at it last night. They got the double dip, meaning they got the ball first in the second half. Right before halftime, they go down, they kick a field goal. Ensuing possession, they go score a touchdown. Boom, 10 points right there. And that took your lead from a 10-point lead to a 20-point lead. Good at math. Almost immediately. That's a huge difference in the ball game. But this team was prepared. They didn't look super prepared on that first drive, but you know what? Like, I don't want to make excuses. I'm sure Andy Avalos is watching the film and pointing out things they need to do. But it was almost like, all right, we have to get a look at what they're doing. And once they saw what Gio Lopez and Freddie Kitchens were going to throw at them, they settled in and they played really well. They did an outstanding job all night long. Players who stood out. I talked about Kavorian Barnes and Jordan Dwyer on the post-game show. If you didn't check that out, you can do that. It's on the YouTube page here. We'll have live post-game shows after games, along with the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday episodes. So let's start with people that I was wrong about. I told you a couple weeks before the season, I was like, have cautious expectations when it comes to Paul Oluwole, because he hadn't been playing football for a year plus. He had the Achilles injury that he's coming off of. I just don't know how effective he can be immediately. He stepped in as a starter last night, looked great. Was pressuring the quarterback. And there were multiple instances in that game where a defensive lineman just completely dominated the guy in front of him. Marcus Deal driving the center and the guard straight back into the quarterback. Tristan Johnson, he didn't get a sack, but he had a big hit on Max Johnson where he just bull rushed the center right into Max Johnson's lap and finished it off with a really nice hit. But Paul looked great coming off an Achilles injury. Zach Chapman looked fantastic after a really good freshman season. He was around the passer. Jonathan Bax, who I said, hey, this is a year where he really needs to show up and be a force on this defense, because we've been saying it the last few off seasons. We felt like he could, be someone who's a factor within this defense, and it hasn't come to fruition yet. Well, he forced a fumble last night that Devin Deal ended up scooping up and going to score on. It was a big swing moment in the game. It was, if there was any doubt left, that was the final nail in the coffin that said, okay, we're winning this ball game, and that's enough. He made plays. The Deal brothers made plays. The secondary looked great. Whoever it was matched up in coverage, they did a good job. There were a couple missed assignments on that first drive, but other than that, they looked fast. They looked physical. Bud Clark, who said that the secondary was going to make a big emphasis on intercepting passes, he baits Lopez into a bad throw on the sidelines on an out route, knew exactly where to go, just stepped in front of that route, took it to the house. Fantastic game from the TCU secondary. There was that stat at one point that North Carolina had gone 2 hours and 7 minutes of real time without completing a pass. That was a real stat that they were putting up on the score graphics last night, because that's how abysmal North Carolina's pass offense was at times. The tight end position, welcome back to TCU football. DJ Rogers had a good game. Looked athletic, made some plays. Chase Curtis, I hope he's okay. I imagine he's going to be in concussion protocol. He took a vicious hit over the middle. But he's an important part of this team. He brings a physicality that they need. He had a great catch for that first down. And that's without Kamorian Pimpton. I think they're going to be even better once he gets healthy. Cade Bennett, coming off a back injury, seamlessly worked his way back into the lineup really well. And the left side of that offensive line, you can tell they like to run the ball there. And yeah, North Carolina's defensive line, not very good. I don't think they're a force to be reckoned with. But this is a team that even against the likes of Nicholls State and Long Island really struggled to run the ball the last few years. So whether it's a good D line or bad D line, it's encouraging that they found a way to be effective running the football, regardless of what the personnel looked like. Because that was, I mean, it's been like pulling teeth, especially last season. So just the fact that they were able to do it consistently, I think that bodes really well for this team moving forward. It gives them the opportunity to reset, to find out what they did well. You know, Kendall Briles said it in the offseason. He was like, we're trying to simplify things a little bit in the run game, focus on what we're good at instead of having all these concepts, maybe narrow it down to 3 or 4 concepts that we really like and run those effectively. That's what we want to do. They did a good job of that on Monday night. The Big 12 looks wide open. Well, before I get to that, one more thing about the game. I did see some weeping and gnashing of teeth about some of the play calls and the play calling. I get it. It wasn't perfect. I didn't like that draw play to Barnes on the 1 minute drive before halftime. I didn't know what that was about, the delayed draw. The screen pass in the red zone, I was watching that today. I said on the postgame show that was to Barnes. It wasn't. My mistake. That was to Jordan Bailey, who, by the way, was another guy that I was wrong about. I thought his injuries during fall camp would keep him from being a contributor. He wasn't a huge part of yesterday's game, but he got some snaps. And I know there was one play where Josh just missed him because he was under pressure, but he was running free for a touchdown if you could have looked up and found him. But anyway, Jordan Bailey was in the game, and he was a part of what they do. The quick game and the screen game last night left a lot to be desired. Now, I did like that one kind of wacky formation they put up there where they had 4 wide receivers stacked on one side, and they basically just made a wall, and they threw it out to Barnes and got a first down on a 3rd and 1. But yeah, that screen pass to Jordan Bailey, I didn't love the call. The throw was bad. It was high. It's also one of those things, though, where, like, follow me here. I think this team struggles more in 3rd and 4 and 3rd and 5 than 3rd and 2, because in theory, the entire playbook should be open to you. But I believe instead of doing some more like bread and butter concepts, sometimes Briles just outthinks himself and makes some really confusing decisions. And so I didn't like the tunnel screen. And watching it on replay, like, even if they got the ball to Bailey, there was no way he was getting the first down. There, I guess it was Hughes. The tackle was supposed to get out to the second level and get a block on the linebacker, but there was no way he was reaching him. So even if Josh completed the pass and there was pressure in his face immediately, he just made an ill-advised throw, and it ended up being an interception. AP Top 25 poll came out today. TCU is not in the poll, but they did receive votes. And if you go down the line numerically, they are 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So they're not too far outside the top 25. Bottom line, I think if they beat SMU in a few weeks, they'll be a top 25 team. So that would be my my take on that right now. The Big 12 looks wide open. Utah looked good against UCLA this weekend. Iowa State won convincingly in their game against South Dakota, I believe, and they're 2-0 after winning against Kansas State. Texas Tech looked really good, but it was Arkansas Pine Bluff. But Colorado, they lose to Georgia Tech. Baylor, they get beat by Auburn, and then they got to turn around and play SMU this week. So that's a tough ball game. Got to get ready for that. Kansas State, they end up holding on and winning against North Dakota, but it was kind of touch and go at times. This league, I mean, it truly does feel like anybody could take it. And that was one of the more impressive wins of the weekend that TCU was able to get done and make happen when they took down Bill Belichick's North Carolina team and got that victory. Transitioning briefly to still a football topic, but more future-oriented. TCU got their first commitment of the 2027 class. Jerry Meyer from Waxahachie, 6 feet tall, 170 pounds. He had offers from Baylor, Mississippi State, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Nebraska, Ole Miss, and others. He's not ranked yet, but that's just because he's a incoming junior. Well, he is a junior now. He just played his first game, I guess. But coming off his sophomore season in Waxahachie, where he threw for 3,308 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions as a sophomore. He was named the District 11 6A Newcomer of the Year and led Waxahachie to a 9-4 record and appearance in the third round of the Texas 6A D2 playoffs. Waxahachie not exactly been known for a ton of success. So that's something that he got them to the third round of the playoffs. You watch his tape. This is a dude that can make all the throws. I mean, really impressive, put zip on the ball, but also seems to have a good feel for, when he needs to have some touch on it. And mobility wise, I mean, wasn't running away from a lot of players, but was mobile enough, good at getting outside the pocket, was very good at throwing on the run and making plays off schedule. So I really like this pickup. It's their first pickup of the 2027 class. Now there's a long way to signing day, but this is a good start. And, this coaching staff, Josh Hoover counts as one of their guys, even though he wasn't a super heralded recruit coming to the high school. But Josh Hoover, Haas Haney, who ended up going to Oklahoma State, and unfortunately for him, suffered an injury in week 1 there, but he was named the starter. Adam Schobel, who's on campus now. Jack Dalton, having a really good career down in the Houston area. And now Jerry Meyer. They do a good job of identifying talent at that position and finding guys who can play. I really like this pickup. And I like starting your class with a quarterback. It doesn't always work out that way, and it's not like a killer if you don't. But I just think it's important that such a important position and a leadership position, it's good to have that player being, the bookend of your class, so to speak, and the linchpin that keeps it together. But exciting news. Recruiting already happening in the 2027 world as they get ready to start, picking that up as we go through the season into the offseason. My guess is he'll be a 4-star prospect when he's rated. I don't know that for sure, but that's just my assumption. And he'll have plenty of time to work his way up from there. But that's my guess right now as to where he would land when and if they end up ranking him on the different recruiting services. Okay, before we go, I really hate that there's a bye week this week. Again, I get it. I know that you're having to travel back. You would have gotten back today or on Tuesday, and then you got to turn around and play on a Saturday. And not to underestimate ACU. I wish they had the bye week before the SMU game. Now, I guess in theory, you could say the coaching staff can target their preparation for the SMU game even during this week. But I mean, from a health standpoint, hopefully you get some guys back that had to sit out fall camp and maybe weren't ready yesterday. Chase Curtis, we'll see what his status is, but there were no real serious injuries that I know of from Monday night's game. You don't need a huge break after week 1. So I don't like that it's falling where it is. And Reese Davis mentioned this on the broadcast on Monday. They play North Carolina again in Ireland. Now, who knows? Bill Belichick looked pretty miserable last night. Maybe he moves on before that ball game. But Reese made a good point. He was like, TCU's kind of running it up and rubbing it in their face right now. I think they'll remember that for next year when they go to Ireland. He's probably right. TCU's going to have their head on a swivel and be locked in for that football game next season. But right now, we're worried about this season. And what I saw from TCU on Monday night was they have the potential to be a really good team. I understand the opponent was not that great and had a lot of issues, and seems like even continuity and discipline are big hurdles for that North Carolina team right now. But this was not a fluke win. This was from start to finish a dominating performance from a TCU football team that hasn't had a lot of those over the last few years, and they looked the part in this ball game. Now you got to capture that momentum and keep it moving forward. but couldn't really ask for a better start to the season for Sonny Dykes squad. Excuse me. We'll be back on Friday. It's the Frog Factor podcast. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. Have a good day, everybody.